In an unprecedented move today, the President, John Dramani Mahama, acting on the advice of the Council of State, suspended the Chief Justice. It's never happened before. This is the first time we're seeing this happen in the Fourth Republic, where a sitting Chief Justice has been suspended by the President on the advice of the Council of State. And so, as you can imagine, it has been a major news day as far as this is concerned. There's a lot still to unpack. You're at the right place. This is PMX, so this is exactly what we're going to do for you. The first thing the President did, once the decision was taken and announced that the Chief Justice has been suspended, was to form a 5-member committee. The task is simple. They will now investigate and give a hearing to the Chief Justice to come before them and answer to the 3 petitions that have now been put before them asking for her removal. They will interrogate the basis and the grounds. She will now have an opportunity, either by herself or with an expert or a lawyer of her choice, to put in the defense. Now, the 5 members of this committee, 2 of them are her own colleagues on the bench at the Supreme Court. And of course, they were her subordinates on the bench. She administratively would empanel and appoint some of them today going forward. 2 of them, one, of course, the chairman, in this case, Justice Gabriel Scott Palmer. You know him, the former General Secretary of the PNC. He himself had a lot of controversy around his appointment, but he is the chair appointed by the President to oversee the investigations into the 3 petitions before them. He is going to chair that committee. He's also called Supreme Court Justice and appointed by John Dramani Mahama. And I remember when his appointment was first put forth, it was very controversial because of his political background. Well, he became a Supreme Court judge and has since been there, and he will chair this. He is going to be supported by another justice of the Supreme Court, in this case, Adibu Asiedu, Justice Samuel Kwame Adibu Asiedu, who will support him in evaluating the evidence thoroughly before them. And as you know, and see on the smart wall there, he was appointed by former President John Agyekum Kufuor, and of course he's been there since that time, and of course has been very instrumental in some of the very important cases. He was appointed then way back to the High Court and climbed all the way to the Appeals Court, to the Supreme Court, and is going to be the 2nd justice. Now, you know, this other member of the committee, the Supreme Court, is obviously now a subject of a lot of controversy because the head of the judiciary itself has been suspended. It's never happened before, at least in the Fourth Republic. And so you can imagine those 2 justices will have a lot to say, but there's a lot that their own reputations will now have to sort of sift through, and will have to weigh the outcome and the evidence. Will have to weigh, because they are the judges. They know how to evaluate the evidence. But this man here, Daniel Yaw-Ademolevo, you know him, he is the former Auditor General. He himself was subject to a very controversial removal by the previous president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. And guess what? At the time when the president asked him to proceed on leave, when civil society fought it, they went to the Supreme Court. When they went to the Supreme Court, they filed to challenge it. And I remember then, the Supreme Court, according to the civil society groups that went there, including CDD, accused the Supreme Court of delaying in empaneling judges to hear that particular matter. Eventually, when they empaneled and the case was called, it was a moot point because he had already been removed from office and it was inconsequential. But of course, the decision came in at the time. It was too late, right? Interestingly, he is now going to sit in judgment of the Chief Justice. Bottom line, that's what it's going to be. He will be weighing, together with the 4 others, whether or not there is enough basis in the 3 petitions to remove the Chief Justice. How fascinating that will be. And Daniel Yaw-Ademolevo comes to this with impeccable track record indeed, doing a fantastic job as a member of the Oral Preparatory Committee. Again, put together by John Dramani Mahama. But his work really is shot to national fame when he was the Auditor General. And you know he really set the pace when it comes to surcharges. Civil society accepted him. He really was one no-nonsense Auditor General, embraced by all. Even the former government embraced him at the beginning. They praised him for the work that he's done, exposing $5 billion worth of corruption that was tied to the previous administration. Just when he began to now do his work, as many will now point to, that also begin to touch some very important appointees of the previous administration, he came under a lot of criticism. Eventually, he had to bow out because the president said, well, you've reached your retirement age and you needed to go. And so he went. Now, he is a member of this committee. It's going to be fascinating indeed. Also considering his own background recently with the oral committee that was set up, a manifesto promise implemented with him as a member of this particular committee. Will the minority side raise questions about his membership of this particular committee? We'll see how this pans out. And then we know very little of this associate professor, but he's also a member of this particular committee. Professor James Efajisa has been appointed also on this committee. He is the Department of Sociology, University of Ghana, and he is also going to be part of the 3 non-lawyers who are also not members of the Council of State, who will be helping the 2 Supreme Court judges evaluate the evidence before them. And then there's a final individual we know very little of indeed, but we know that he is a member of the Ghana Armed Forces, a very senior member at that. Major Flora Dalugo will also be part of this evaluation. It's been 28 days since, as we know, the Council of State petition went there to evaluate it, and they've been considering this, and the decision was made today. The prima facie case has been made, and so the Chief Justice should be suspended whilst the process goes ahead. And it's traveled a fair bit. He first went to the petition submitted phase. This is all according to the Constitution, by the way. And then also Council of State now determined the prima facie, which has happened today. The President, obviously, once this happens, has a few options. He can set up this committee, which is done, and that, by the way, is a must. But what the Constitution gives him a discretion to do, which means he can choose not to, is to suspend the Chief Justice. He's chosen to exercise that discretion in favor of a suspension, right? That in itself is a contested matter. We'll get my colleagues, my panelists to weigh in on that when we sit for a conversation. And then 5, the committee now will submit a recommendation to him. And once they submit, he's obliged to follow the recommendations as submitted by the committee. And then at the time, if they say she will be removed at the time, indeed. The minority have issued a strongly worded statement 3 hours ago in which they accuse the president of, in fact, supervising a coup, a brazen political coup, judicial coup, overthrowing the Chief Justice. They say it is a political vendetta against the judiciary, and that the NDC wants to pack the courts with their own people. And they were very clear that they will resist this with everything they have. In fact, they've suggested tonight that there will be protests, public protests, if the president doesn't do 2 things. 1, if he doesn't reinstate the Chief Justice, and if he does not suspend the process currently ongoing to remove her. Okay, we'll sit for a conversation pretty shortly on this particular matter because, as you know, it is a very controversial one today. We haven't seen this before, so you can imagine. But we know now that already an acting Chief Justice is in play and working already because the process is very, very clear. Once the Chief Justice is in there, the next most senior justice of the Supreme Court steps in and acts. That's what's going to happen. And we know the identity of this individual. He is Justice Paul Baffour-Bonney. He is now acting Chief Justice, and you know he was himself appointed by the Kufuor administration in 2008, appointed by, at the time, of course, when he was appointed, he had done a lot of work in that particular area, and he has some great works to his name. He, as you know, was very instrumental in the John Dramani Mahama winning that very controversial 2012 presidential petition that went to the Supreme Court. He had, many say, the deciding vote because it was 5-4. He was among the 5 justices of the Supreme Court who said John Mahama genuinely won the 2012 elections. And without him, really, John Dramani Mahama wouldn't have been president at the time. And that's just a fact to look at. Also, another fact is that his wife was recently appointed as head of the prison service. And then we also know that he had a brother, a very famous brother, who was the head of the Radio Good at some point. But he comes to this with great judicial pedigree in terms of the work that he's done there. He is acting Chief Justice. It's not automatic by any sort of imagination that when this process is done, he becomes a substantive matter. Yes, now, by virtue of the protocols and the constitutional dictates, he is the next most senior. But in the appointment of a substantive CJ, senior most, isn't necessarily the only consideration that the appointing authority will consider. And so that we'll talk about too. Sit down for a conversation right after this. And thanks for joining us here on PM Express. It's a very important day, historic one indeed, a day which saw the suspension of a sitting Chief Justice. And I've just been joined by my panelists to weigh in on the unfolding controversy. PMS is always brought to you by Syntax Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. Academic Times, the Public Speaker Series, and Pepsodent Cavity Fighter toothpaste. Joining me for a conversation tonight is a man you know, joins us here for a conversation all the time. Justice Tremsai is the Deputy Attorney General and Minister for Justice, will join us pretty shortly for a conversation on this. Sam Okudzeto is a former member of the Council of State, the former president of the Ghana Bar Association. We expect him to also join us. Frank Davis is the chairman of the Constitutional and Legal Committee of the New Patriotic Party, joins us by Zoom. Professor Kojo Epie-Tia is Associate Professor of Law of the University of Ghana, also joins us for a conversation tonight. And we will also have the opportunity to delve deeper into the thoughts of the of some of the key individuals who have been following this throughout the day, understanding some of the implications of this, basically, for the judiciary. Tremsai will join us pretty shortly with his thoughts on this. But I want to start right now with Frank Davis. And Frank, grateful that you could join us. The minority side issued a strongly worded statement shortly after it was confirmed that the Chief Justice had been suspended, in which they called the decision to suspend her brazen judicial coup and a reckless abuse of executive power. Do you ascribe to this description, this labeling of the decision of the president?
Thank you once and grateful once again, and good evening to your esteemed listeners and viewers. Permit me to share my own thoughts.
Okay. You disagree or you align with that?
I don't have to disagree. I don't have to align. Evans, just permits me to share my own thoughts on the matter.
What are your thoughts on it?
Yes. Well, as a trained lawyer, Evans, I rather would have wished that we are not where we are now. Because this obviously is the first in our democratic dispensation that the Chief Justice has had to be suspended on petitions which have been filed against her, ostensibly for her removal. I see it more as an assault on the judiciary, so to speak.
How so? I mean, this is due process.
Well, can I? I'm not saying it's not due process. Of course, Article 146 is a constitutional structure, so nobody can say that what is happening is not regulated by the Constitution. It's actually a baby of the Constitution, that if petitions are sent for the removal of the Chief Justice, the processes which are going through, with the processes which have been going through thus far, are what is procedurally and lawfully permitted by the dictates of the Constitution. But the reason why I say it's an assault on the judiciary is that we should look at the commentary that has gone on thus far, so far as these petitions are concerned, and the kind of statements which have been made by very senior political actors. And it gives a veiled impression that maybe this Chief Justice is not liked, so there should be an attempt to have her removed. And I'm saying this in
Statements such as?
I have heard an interview that was ascribed to the Deputy General Secretary of the ruling NDC government. He has not come out to disassociate himself with that statement. He has not asked for a retraction of the statement. So I take it that it is a statement that he made. And he was categorical that the Chief Justice will be removed. You know, when statements like this are made, it actually takes the whole exercise out of due process.
I mean, how so? Because I mean, that individual is not the president. He has no constitutional role in the process.
Yeah, he doesn't have to be the president. He is the Deputy General Secretary of the ruling government. Evans, you are also a political actor, even though you're a journalist. You should definitely understand what I'm saying.
What are you saying?
If the Deputy General Secretary, excuse me, if the Deputy General Secretary of the ruling government makes such a statement, of course, he's not the president. I haven't said he's a president, but it has far-reaching implications.
Such as?
He's not the only one. Excuse me?
I mean, you say it has far-reaching implications.
Yeah, it means that he, as a senior officer of the ruling government, subscribes to the fact that the Chief Justice should be or will be removed when even the processes have not unfolded. These categorical statements are unnecessary. I mean, they are needless. You see, they color the whole atmosphere, and if you are even supposed to err on the side of the Constitution and on the side of due process, you are challenged. Now, he's not the only person who has said so. I've also heard the national chairman of the NDC also make a public statement that, yes, it is due process, but the judiciary, there should be a reset of the judiciary and all that. What is that supposed to mean? Well, what is the meaning of there should be a reset of the judiciary? So the reset of the judiciary is what we are saying, that the Chief Justice should be removed so that there will be a reset of the judiciary. Now, you see, when there's a lawful exercise being undertaken by the president, who obviously has little option in the matters, when a petition is forwarded to the president, he cannot say that he won't look at it or he won't forward it to the Council of State. He is bound by the Constitution so to do. So yes, he is undertaking his constitutional duty and lawful exercise of a sitting president. But when members of his political party, which is in government, go out to make such statements, it becomes a big challenge.
Okay, but fundamentally, you don't disagree that this is due process.
But how can I disagree with it?
Yes. So I mean, of what consequence?
I mean, as a student of law, how can I disagree with it?
So of what consequence are the other tangential comments by Deputy General Secretary and the Chairman, etc., when the process itself is being followed according to the letter? Isn't that what we should be looking at? We live in a society. We don't live in outer space. We live in a society, and it is the societal norms which governs all of us. Apart from matters as in it's a constitutional or a due process. So, if political actors who are supposed to know better and who ascribe to the philosophy of the ruling government
say those things, they tie the hands of the president. It's something you should understand.
Hold on for me, because the Deputy Attorney General is with me. I want to put that to him.
Excuse me. Can I round?
I'll return to you. But because they have a lot of people on the line. Just stay with me. I'll come to you. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Justice Tremsai, the point he's making is one that many have made also. Yes, there is a constitutional process. He doesn't dispute that. But you can also weaponize a constitutional provision, and some accuse you of doing exactly that you're bending the Constitution to your political will. How do you respond to that?
Thank you very much, Evans, and good evening to you and your esteemed listeners and viewers. I think the point is clear that the constitutional process has been followed strictly, and so far, I'm yet to see or hear any argument against the constitutionality of the process. And as has been indicated, a committee was, a Council of State was consulted by the president. The president came up with a decision of the Council of State, which is that a prima facie case has been, established. One thing we need to understand is that establishing a prima facie case does not mean that the Chief Justice is guilty of the allegations in the petition. It is only when the committee comes up to either confirm or refute the allegation, or to say that these, what we call it, the allegations in the petition are confirmed, that we can say the Chief Justice is guilty. What has happened is merely a process to give the Chief Justice an opportunity to explain away the allegations in the petition, which I believe the Chief Justice is capable of, doing without any fear or any concern. As to what my friend in the studio is saying about comments of political activists or political supporters, I think it's neither here nor there.
No, but you say it's neither here nor there, but justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. Considering the fact that the president himself, in 2020, just a second, in 2023, at the NDC Lawyers Conference at Kosovo, said, quote, "So I encourage some of you to look at the careers on the bench so that we can balance out what the current situation is. We must be prepared as NDC legal persons to also go onto the bench."
Let me ask
those colored this process within the political...
there are also allegations. You see, I don't want to go into that, what political commentaries have been run, because there are also political commentaries which also says that the bench has been packed. There are political commentaries which have actually impugned the integrity of some judges, even on the Supreme Court. There are political commentaries that have also done so many things. But if that is what you want us to have a conversation on this evening, of course, then we can go into that. But my understanding is that we are analyzing what has happened today as against the constitutionality. So I don't want to go into those areas, and I don't believe that my friend in the studio, is interested in having a political commentary instead of educating the public on the legal process that has begun. If we are here to have political commentary, I'm ready for it, but I don't think that is what we are here for. So what I can do is to try to help the audience, your viewers, who are interested in understanding the legal process and the legal steps that have been taken and whether they conform with the Constitution or not. If that is the case, then may I go on to help you educate the public on the legal consequences and the legal effect of what has happened. If that's the case, may I go on?
Yeah, I mean, on the substantive matter, which Frank Davis, by the way, who was speaking earlier, he doesn't dispute the fact that this is due process. The president has very little say in the matter, and that what has happened today is a result of due process.
So exactly from what you have said, if he agrees that the president doesn't have any influence in the matter and the due process is commencing, why then do we say that some other person who is not the president, who is a political activist, probably responding to certain context matters within a certain context, are influencing the process? If the president, who is directly involved in the process, cannot influence it, how then do you blame some other person? So you see, even internally, the argument is inconsistent. And it's contradictory internally. So that is why I'm saying that I think your viewers are in this evening to understand the legal processes, to understand the legal consequences of what has happened and what is yet to come. If it is your choice for us to have political commentaries and ascribe motives to people who are not involved in the process and their comments, we can do that. But I want to know from you that what exactly do you want us to discuss? Because when you
on the constitutionality of the process.
Exactly. So let's proceed with the constitutionality
on the constitutionality of the process. On the constitutionality of the process, the minority's accusation is there is a case currently before the Supreme Court challenging the process itself, and that before the process is determined, the president had gone ahead to suspend the CJ, and that in itself is an affront to the same constitution that he is attempting to uphold.
That is completely contrary to what legal principle we all subscribe to as lawyers. I mean, I am a lawyer. I've practiced over how many years, and I believe my very good friend in the studio, Mr. Frank Davis, has practiced law over decades, and he understands that when the Constitution ascribes or prescribes a function to someone to perform, you cannot, by mere word of mouth or by mere wishes or desire, stop the person from performing that function. What you can do is to secure a court order to prevent the person. Now, the question is, has there been any court order to say that the process cannot continue? Obviously not. And this is not the first time we are here. We've been here in terms of, in the past, when e-levy was, you remember the e-levy situation. You remember the, what we call it, the LGBTQ bill. This argument has been made so many times, and the Supreme Court has refuted it several times that when a constitutional function is about to perform, a mere filing of application does not stop the person. It is only when the court hears the application and makes a definite order, then you can say the person is. So So the argument being made is neither here nor there nor anywhere for that or for that matter.
Please stay with me. I want to bring in Professor Pejuto into this controversy as far as the constitution of the process is concerned. The president took the decision to suspend the Chief Justice today. The minority's point is that the president should not have acted the way he acted today because there's a case before the Supreme Court on the constitutionality of the process. Where do you stand on that question?
Thanks for having me. Well, the whole constitutional the case before the Supreme Court came about as a result of the fact that the Chief Justice felt aggrieved by not being given the opportunity to present her side of the case before a prima facie determination is made, which was granted. So from that angle, I would have thought that these cases before the Supreme Court would be moot. But they are still there. And I think that in view of that, in my opinion, while I agree with the fact that the president has a constitutional mandate to fulfill, since the case was in court, I don't see the need for the rush for the president to have come up with continue the process. And so probably a little more of weight may have helped for the Supreme Court to make a pronouncement on that decision.
So sorry, for clarity, are you suggesting that the president should have waited for the Supreme Court before suspending her?
I'm not sure if it would have changed anything, because in that case, we would have had a declaration by the Supreme Court or a decision by the Supreme Court on the matter. And so, in my opinion, it wouldn't have hurt for for the president to have waited for a decision from the Supreme Court.
Now, there's also a subject around this suspension today, and there's a constitutional provision that guided it. And in fact, the statement mentioned it, the 14610, that where the president has been referred to, where the petition has been referred to a committee under this article, the president may, in the case of the Chief Justice, acting in accordance with the advice of the Council of State by warrant, signed by him, suspend the Chief Justice. So this is a discretionary power, right? I mean, the president may decide or may decide to keep her there. He decided right now to exercise that discretion in favor of a suspension. But is the president, it says on the advice of the Council of State, does this suggest that this suspension was recommended by the Council of State?
It should be so, but we all know that the Supreme Court has made a ruling that the advice of the Council of State is not binding on the president. So it doesn't change the scenario. The point here is that it is a discretionary power granted the president. And so whether he exercises it this way or that way should not be subject to some people even saying that they are going to take the matter to the Supreme Court for the Supreme Court to rule on the matter. I think it is clear on the face of it that the president can exercise that power. The same way in the course of the committee sitting, as the Constitution also says, he can decide to revoke that suspension and allow the CJ to come back to perform her role as a CJ. So I don't think we can question that.
Okay. Let me get some clarity on that subject around the advice from the Deputy Attorney General. Stremsai, do you have any clarity on whether or not it is the Council of State that advised the president to suspend her?
Yes, that is exactly what happened. And I think that is, you may see that in the press release that the presidency, published today. The last paragraph, I think, is clear on the matter that the president's decision to suspend the Chief Justice is in accordance with the advice of the Council of State. So that is what it is.
I mean, we know that the president the council can advise. The president is not obliged to take that advice. So they could have actually said, do not suspend, and the president would have still gone ahead to suspend it. That's what I wanted to clarify, if indeed they said, recommended for her suspension. Yes,
that is what I'm saying, that is exactly what the statement is saying, and that is what it is. So if you read the statement, and let me read, pursuant to Article 14610 of the Constitution and in accordance with the advice of the Council of State, the president has by warrant suspended the Chief Justice. So if the advice was, if he did not act in accordance with the advice, I'm sure the statement would have made it clear that the president made a decision, So I think that, not that I think, I am aware that that is what happened. And that is what the communication, from the presidency also published.
Well, was this a unanimous recommendation?
Well, I don't think that will be made known, because the council, if you, and I'm happy that my very learned, senior, who was a member of the Council of State, would inform the public that the Council of State mostly work with consensus. They hardly go with votes and counting and all that. So. And I believe that this decision, this advice also was made in the consensus. By way of consensus rather than by casting votes and counting votes. Okay. And let me just add that, you see, I think there's some level of misapprehension from a particular section, of the political divide, trying to make it look as though this is the end of the road for the Chief Justice. But I don't believe so. I know that the persons who are members of the committee are persons who have, over the years, demonstrated that they can distinguish, chaff from the grain and separate them. And I also believe that the Chief Justice is capable of explaining or mounting a defense to the best that could be found. So personally, I am very open-minded about what may come out of these, committee inquiry. And I think that most people also have the same view, that the committee will be open, and it's a question of evidence and a question of what is right and what is wrong. So we probably will be jumping the gun in either celebrating or in either crying that this has happened. I don't have any doubt that the hearing will be fair, and of course the constitutional process will be adhered to going forward, not just in what we have seen so far, but also going forward. I know that the constitutional processes will be adhered to, and to be honest, the suspension itself, it depends on factors that we all know. First one is that, look, the office of the Chief Justice is a very heavy office with so many responsibilities. And you just have to sit in one meeting with the Chief Justice to know the volume of work that it entails to be a Chief Justice. Thousands of pages of documents she has to read every time, attend meetings. And in addition to that, the Chief Justice of the Republic is also a judge, like any other judge with other responsibilities. And I see why it will be probably advisable that under these circumstances where she has not just one, not just two, but three petitions to respond to, she will need sufficient space and time to mount her defense. And I cannot imagine burdening oneself with administrative and judicial functions of the Office of the Chief Justice together with responding to three, different petitions concurrently. So I think that the suspension could be, these are some of the things that the President and the Council of State considered in even giving the suspension. Rather than thinking that the suspension is punishment, I don't think so, because constitutionally, suspensions are not punishment, because the law makes it clear that you cannot punish someone unless the person is found guilty. So when the Constitution provides that the person will be suspended, it cannot be taken to mean that it is punishment for the person. It is just an administrative procedure, and we have seen it in so many civil service and the civil service in private companies. When someone is accused of wrongdoing, the person is at the helm of an institution. What usually happens is that we ask you to step aside so that the investigation will be conducted, both for yourself to not interfere and also for you to have space to present a formidable defense. And I think that is how we should see this suspension situation. Okay. And I don't think that the Chief Justice will consider the suspension as a punishment for anything that she may do or she might have done.
Yeah, I mean, Justice Tremsah, stay with me. I want to bring in lawyer Samuel Kudjeto now. I mean, you know that he was a prominent member of the Council of State, yes, and he joins us right now with some insights into what has happened tonight. I'm grateful, lawyer Samuel Kudjeto, for your time here on PM Express. And I want to, now that we've heard the Attorney General confirm that the Council of State actually advised the President to suspend her, this is a fair outcome, is it not, that the President has exercised that discretion reasonably, fairly, and has not been capricious at all in exercising that discretion? Wouldn't that be a fair conclusion to come to? Kindly unmute for me. Okay, we'll try and address the audio challenge there and then get the...
Can you hear me now?
I can hear loud and clear. I'm very grateful that indeed you made time to join us, yes.
Okay.
Fair outcome?
Well, yeah, I think the important thing for us to appreciate is that this is the first time that this situation has arisen in our country. And of course, there's a lot of agitation here and there. The misfortune in all this is the politicians who sometimes cannot keep their temper down. And the utterances, unfortunately, there are so many radio stations and television stations that some of us have virtually closed our ears, because I don't hear until somebody tells me that somebody had done this or done that. I will not even know the truth or otherwise of it. But the stories I have heard was that senior party officials of the governing party had made utterances to the effect that they will sack the Chief Justice. They were not only the Chief Justice, but also the Electoral Commissioner. I have heard this once. And the persons referred to are supposed to be very high party officials, including even the chairman of the party, which I think is unfortunate. Because when we are not careful as a country, we get politics into almost every situation. We bastardize the process. And particularly because we have the international community also monitoring what goes on in the country. And that's the more reason why all of us should be cautious in the kind of utterance that we make. The Council of State was put there as an institution to help to counsel and advise the President. The misfortune in it, of course, was that the pronouncement made by the court itself to declare that their advice is not binding. That was rather an unfortunate situation. In my view, it's a question of dialogue, that the President and the Council of State should be dialoguing all the time. And I even remembered saying something to this effect, that the Council of State was meant to be a sounding board, so that when the president has a problem, he takes it to the council and said, Council of State, what do you think about it? And then the Council of State can look at the matter because they have power even to summon experts to come and advise the council. Because the council is not pretending that it knows everything or they have access to all knowledge and all processes. No. But they've been given the power to summon or to counsel other people to come and advise them if they are in doubt on an issue. And that being the case, what had happened in this particular case, which I was worried about, was the fact that when the petitions were received by the president, a minister went on air to talk about the president having received a petition, even at a time when the Chief Justice was not even informed about the petition. That I thought was unfortunate one, because I had an experience of that, where a petition was sent. But in that context, it was the petitioner who went and made the publicity. And we as a council took that matter to task and said that it was improper. A petition to the president was not meant to be publicized. And even the communication between the president and the Council of State was not meant to be publicized. It is only when, after they have finished their job communications and come to a conclusion, which is the prima facie case, it's only then that publicity could have been given.
On that point of the prima facie, though, if you don't mind giving me your thoughts on what has happened today, unprecedented, you called it. The president took the decision to suspend him. We are now learning that the council actually advised the suspension. What are your thoughts on the decision taken by the president today? Fair?
Well, the question is not fair. The question is that it's a provision in the Constitution. And don't forget that this Constitution that we are working on now has a lot of loopholes, because there is nothing that the presidency has come out with to decide as to how he's going to use those powers in the provisions in the Constitution. Normally, you will expect that when a person is given discretionary power, you have to be able to give an indication as to how you are going to exercise it. That, unfortunately, is lacking. I'm not blaming President Mahama for it, but I'm just saying that it's unfortunate, because something like that could have been a legislation or a constitutional instrument, as you might call it, which will explain as the process that's supposed to typically how it should work. That, unfortunately, does not exist. So it's a loophole. It's a loophole in the matter.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah.
So in this context, the president had supposed to work with the Council of State. How they do it, whether he's done it, I have no way of knowing. Now, the question, of course, is that when you suspend a Chief Justice, the signal that is sent out into the international community is quite serious. Indeed, I can assure you that a lot of investors will withhold their investments in your country by virtue of that kind of situation.
Even though it is pursuant to a constitutional provision.
It does not make it any difference what pursuit you are doing it. I'm just saying that we must be quite clear. If you study international relationship, you begin to understand the intricacies involved in the matter. That is why certain things you have to be careful how you handle them. It's not that you handle it, but you must be careful the way and manner in which you handle it. That can give a right, a wrong order to the international community about the justiciability, the legality of your situation, the sensitivity which is involved in it. This is my personal worry.
And there's a question I want to pick your thoughts on very quickly, briefly. If you look at the committee that has been set up now to do the formal inquiry, two justices of the Supreme Court, Pwaman Adibu, you also have Domelevo and an armed forces officer, and you also have an academic. What's your verdict on this committee? You think you have every faith that the committee will do a good job and be fair and give every opportunity to be heard?
I am not in a position to try and judge each of those individuals, their integrity, but I'm just saying that you begin to appreciate that the appointment and the choice of those individuals is exclusively the president's.
Mm-hmm.
There is no one anywhere to tell him what to do, what not to do. Although personally, I would have thought that it would have been a good idea if the president would do that in conjunction with the Council of State. That's my personal view. But it is not a provision in the Constitution. But as I was saying earlier, I said, if perhaps regulations have been made on the exercise of this power, that would have made it much easier for us to determine. Because I know Mr. Domelevo, he had a problem with the previous government, very serious problem with the previous government. That one I know. And of course, now he's on this committee. The armed forces person on the side is a major. I don't know the basis why a major rank, because you have senior positions in the army, like colonels and generals, who also easily would have occupied that position. But I don't know why the choice. But as I said, it's a discretionary power that the president has. So he's exercising that discretion. So there is nothing that I can say as to whether, whether they were the right people or not the right people.
Okay.
Because if it were any position that the president exercising, you must appreciate that as always the possibility of political pressure from his own party. That's why one must. It's not something anyone who understands politics can deny, that the president does not just get up and do things. He has his party behind him. And the party can exert pressure upon him as to what to do, who to appoint, and so on and so forth. So that is quite clear.
And you're not suggesting that in the appointment of these 5 members, that may have played a role, the political question may have played a role?
It is possible. It's a possibility. Nobody can say that it is not possible. It is possible.
Okay. I want to quickly bring in Frank Davis into that particular conversation as far as the committee is concerned. Frank, what's your assessment of that particular committee? Happy with the composition and the individuals on it?
Evans, just to borrow from what my learned senior and uncle has just touched on. Evans, it will be very difficult for me to, as it were, assess or gauge the integrity of the persons who have been selected by the president to constitute this committee. Short of saying that I have had experience of association with the 2 justices of the Supreme Court. Gabriel Scott Palmer was practicing with all of us in the courts before he got elevated onto the bench. And I've known the judicial track record and history of Justice Asiedu on the bench, from the High Court to the Court of Appeal and to the Supreme Court. I cannot for a moment say that I can doubt their integrity. But that is the extent to which I can go. I cannot read into their minds, but I have the utmost confidence that they will discharge their onerous obligations with fidelity to the law and the Constitution. The other 3 persons, I know little of the 2, but I can speak of Domelevo. Well, I honestly don't think that he's someone who is bended. I still want to believe that he holds his integrity high. But Evans, when when you do an assessment, of course, these are my thoughts. I don't think there's any generic explanation for it. It does not come with any philosophical doctrine or any academic research. But when Dom Lavoie had his own issues, in quotes, with the judiciary. So you see, when you throw him out like that, some level of perception feeds in, which does not inure to his benefit. That is not to say that he's not going to discharge his responsibilities, his integrity and credibility. But you see, when the person has had cause, and for people to believe that he's somehow aggrieved by a decision which has gone in his favor, nonetheless, but that at the time that the decision should have been taken, it was overlooked until he had left office. You create a certain perception about him, which is not good for him as a person. You get me? Because you see, we are all human beings. Come on, we don't come from outer space. We are human beings and we are Ghanaians, and we know how Ghanaians think. We are intellectuals. We can understand some of these things because of our level of intelligence, in quotes. But the general public also has his own views about these things. Now, this was someone who was also put on the oral committee, which was also a committee which was constituted by government. Oral had his own challenges, people against and people for. So you put him in quite an obscure position. But I am inclined to believe that with the level of experience, his expertise, and the general niche that he himself, by virtue of his office, has courted for himself, he should be able to rise above the plane. And I wish them all the best of luck. But Evans, let me say this. You see, I was listening to Sremsai go all over the place. Go all over the place. But Sremsai, when you were talking, listen to others. Before you joined the conversation, I had said exactly the same things that you were pontificating on. I don't think it is in your place to come and lecture anyone about due process. Because I started by saying exactly what you said. As you say that Evans should let you know why you have been called, and if it is to educate the public, you can educate the public much better than I can do.
Okay.
So sometimes let us show mutual respect to each other. And website, let's show mutual respect to each other. Now you are on the others. You are now the deputy attorney general, so you think you can talk the way you do. I mean, please.
Okay.
If you listen to me carefully, I was not saying that we should descend into politics on this, but you're a political actor. So far as you have been appointed the deputy attorney general, you're a political actor.
Yeah, on that point, I just need to confirm that yes, you talk about the due process, and you also
So
and
for him to come and say
that.
all the things he said, look. Evans,
in the interest of time, unfortunately, I run out of time on this one. I'm grateful, gentlemen, for joining us. This is a conversation that will continue as a committee swings into action, possibly tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your evening.